I'm really excited today to have Michael Schellenberger. He's been on Dr. Phil, and we were talking about harm reduction, which is a philosophy that believes to avoid deaths from overdoses, that strategies should be implemented to allow drug addicts access to various drugs in a presumably safe way. I'm not so sure that's a really good idea. I don't think Michael does either. Also, under the philosophy, it believes that addicts should be allowed resources, housing, etc., without questions asked about one's sobriety. Now, Michael says that his book, San Francisco, Why Progressives Ruin Cities, examines the way harm reduction policies have emphasized personal liberties but ignore personal responsibilities. Anybody that's been to San Francisco in years past have always thought it was one of the most beautiful cities in the world, one of the most picturesque cities in the world, sitting on the bay there. And there are still parts of San Francisco that are beautiful. I'm sure you would agree.
Oh, it's still my favorite city in the world. I moved out here after college because I am in love with the city, and its essence is still there. It's just a very tarnished jewel at this point.
Talk about that just in general. What has happened and why is it so tarnished? Because this has to have been philosophical and systemic from top to bottom and side to side for a city to get in this much trouble in this short a period of time.
Sure. Well, so San Francisco, it's a very progressive city. It's a city that loves freedom. It's obviously, or maybe not obviously, but I think many people know it's the home to the gay and lesbian movement, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender movements. It's been a place of free spirits. It's very libertarian. It's also very compassionate. It's named after St. Francis, of course, who was the saint of compassion and taking care of the poor and of nature. And the combination of those two things, those two strengths in excess, leads to pathology. And so what's occurred is the coddling of people that are struggling with drug addiction, where they need tough love. They're basically being enabled in their addiction. And so the city is it's overly generous in the sense of basically providing cash, housing, and many other services to people without any requirement that they address the underlying cause of their homelessness. Over 20,000 people come to San Francisco every year as homeless individuals, the vast majority of them struggling with drug addiction and or untreated mental illness. There's ostensibly about 8,000 homeless people in the city at any given time, half of whom are on the streets. And so we've seen a threefold higher overdose rate in San Francisco from drugs, threefold higher than in the United States as a whole or in California. And that's all a consequence of the refusal of San Francisco's leaders to require people to take responsibility for their behaviors, including not defecating in public, not using drugs in public, not camping in public. And many basic laws have stopped being enforced. And so that's what's the fundamental dynamic that's led to the destruction of the city.
Look, go back to Psychology 101. One of the things that we know is you just don't reward bad behavior. Go back to Skinner, go back to the most fundamental behaviorist, whether you're in a rat lab, whether you're dealing with animals, whether you're dealing with humans, the behavior you want to see repeated, you reinforce. The behavior you want to see extinguished, you either punish or withhold reinforcement. Seriously, the first week of Psychology 101, that's one of the principles that you learn, and it holds true across species, across ages within the human race. But it seems like this has been forgotten because it appears that there are certain parts within the political spectrum that believe that if you reinforce certain behaviors, that somehow they will miraculously feel a bond of brotherhood and will just stop their self-destructive behaviors. I don't get it. I'm confused. I don't understand how that is supposed to work. But what you're describing to me sounds like enabling in its most fundamental form. And enabling, that term gets used so much, I think it loses its meaning. It means making it easier or paving the way for someone to continue to do self-destructive behaviors, either giving them money for drugs, giving them housing, protecting them from prosecution, doing anything that you do that makes it possible for them to continue to do what they're doing. Wendy Murphy is an attorney that specializes in the representation of crime victims, particularly women and children. For more than 15 years, Wendy has served as an adjunct professor of sexual violence law at New England Law, Boston. She also co-directs the Women's and Children's Advocacy Project under the Center for Law and Social Responsibility. She's done so much. I could go on forever and not even get to her. There are a lot of people, men and women, but women that get victimized by it, are not aware that women do not have equal protection under the law. They don't have it constitutionally, and they don't have it pragmatically. And you don't realize that until you wind up in the court system, and there's somebody up there saying, HIPAA be damned, confidentiality be damned, and all of the rules of evidence that apply in other crimes all of a sudden are thrown out the window.
Right.
And all of these things that you can't bring up in a robbery case or you can't bring up in a murder case about pre-offense information that never gets in front of a jury, all of a sudden is paraded out in front of the jury about a victim that has been brutally raped. They can now talk about what she did in high school, what she did in college, what she did at a party 3 weeks before this happened. And you're sitting there saying, wait a minute, this predated the offense. What the hell does this have to do with what happened that night?
Yep.
But yet it's admitted, and it's not reversed on appeal when it is clear violation of the rules of evidence. So
Yep.
It doesn't happen just at the trial level, it's upheld at the appellate level.
Yeah, exactly right. So when I've argued countless appeals in these cases, and I've made this point that you cannot treat these types of victims differently. It's just a violation of equal protection of law. And I make all these arguments that are about the Constitution being designed to protect everybody equally and give everybody equal rights. And generally speaking, the courts say back to me, but you're wrong, Ms. Murphy. Women aren't entitled to equal treatment and equal protection of law under the Constitution. You need to fix the 14th Amendment and then come back and make that argument to us. And boy, is that a hard pill to swallow, to be in a court of law where there's some sign on the wall that says equal justice under law. And that's just not right. I'll give you a couple of good examples that apply specifically to therapy records that were devastating in cases. And this continues to happen today. One, I was representing a woman who'd been nearly killed by a man who had also brutally raped and killed other women. And she was brave enough to testify against him, and he demanded access to her counseling records that predated this man's brutal assault of her. We fought like hell to stop those records from being turned over, because when she had therapy, she was told by her therapist that was a private session, that what she was saying was confidential, and she needed that promise of confidentiality in order to be open about her feelings and to get better. But the judge basically, and when I challenged the judge who ordered the records turned over, I said, what does this have to do with anything about what happened the night he beat her? Why aren't you ordering her to turn over her grocery receipts if you don't care about relevancy, right? The judge slammed his gavel and said, Ms. Murphy, if you keep talking, I'm going to dismiss the charges and this man will walk free. That's what it came to. So my client started sobbing. She begged me to give him anything he wants. If this man gets out of jail, he's going to kill me. Please just give him my counseling records. So we did. In the records, there was a description of her being sexually abused by her dad when she was a little girl. No one knew about it. Her family didn't know. And of course, what did that man use as evidence during the trial? That she had been sexually abused by her father, and she was now falsely accusing him in order to avenge her childhood experience. She ended up winning the case, but what a price to pay that had to be revealed to the whole world, because the news was covering the case. Her family found out. Everyone learned something that should have been confidential, had nothing to do with the case, was deeply personal to her. And that's a price for justice that we only impose on women, and it's outrageous.
Justin Paperny is the co-founder of White Collar Advice. He wrote a book called Lessons from Prison, and there's a lot of insight there. Your background and who you are. You're a felon and an ex-con.
Yes.
You got sentenced to the federal penitentiary for white-collar crime, and it had to do with conspiracy to commit fraud with regard to securities, correct?
I was a stockbroker at Bear Stearns, then UBS, and several years into my career, despite all the success I had, I found myself making some bad decisions on behalf of a client. As a result of those poor choices, I was inevitably sentenced to 18 months in federal prison.
I don't want to get into the specifics of your crime because, frankly, people don't care. What they do care about is you got caught, and now you're quick to say that you were wrong. You were guilty, correct?
Indeed. One of my biggest regrets is not accepting responsibility sooner. And as a result of my not accepting responsibility sooner, I made it harder on victims, those that love and support me. So that was my biggest regret amongst a long list of regrets.
When you first got charged, you were in denial at the same time, correct?
When I learned that I was in trouble, I said, this is not a big deal. They're going to see that I didn't have bad intent, that I was clearly swept into this, and they're going to see that I'm a student athlete from USC and I had hundreds of clients who loved me and I never had a problem before. So as a result of that flawed thinking and spinning lies to lawyers, then later lying to the FBI because I did not want them to perceive me as a criminal, I had lied and made matters measurably worse. So denial took years off of my life and led to a longer prison sentence.
I want to break that down a little bit. So you got charged, and at the time, had you admitted to yourself that you had done wrong, or were you deluding yourself?
I was deluding myself. In fact, I've trained new agents at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and when the FBI agent that arrested me introduced me to the agents, he said, before I spoke, had Justin been honest with us when we interviewed him, we would not have pursued prosecution. Think about how different my life is as a result of my unwillingness to accept responsibility in front of two FBI agents because of shame, denial, living like the ostrich with my head buried. So yes, my life is forever changed because I couldn't step up and say, I made some bad decisions and I regret them.
So he said if you had been honest, they wouldn't have prosecuted you?
Think about that. I talk a lot about post-offense conduct in this Varsity Blues college cheating case. We've got to pay attention to post-offense conduct, what defendants are doing between indictment and a potential trial or sentencing hearing. It is a big deal, the record they need to begin to create as a law-abiding citizen because the government is judging them for some bad decisions they made. They've got to work to change that narrative. I did that terribly as a defendant. They have an opportunity to do better.
But at the time you were sitting in front of the FBI agent, you weren't just lying to him, you were lying to yourself.
And to my lawyers, flushing money down the toilet. I was a lawyer's dream client potentially.
You said you spent $50,000.
$50,000 just to get in the door and sign a retainer for a white-collar defense attorney. I blew through $50,000. Lying immediately. I didn't want to own and acknowledge my criminal conduct. As I wrote in Lessons from Prison, I needed someone like me to drop a bucket of cold ice on my head and maybe throw a right punch and say, get it together, bud. I didn't have that.
You said that you then got a criminal lawyer.
I did.
You were talking about taking a polygraph, and this lawyer said, look, do not lie. You cannot beat this polygraph. Do not kid yourself. Do not go in there and try to lie. And you studied countermeasures.
Not only, before I studied countermeasures, I told my lawyer, I said, I'm insulted. I'm innocent. I've done nothing wrong. I'm being swept into this. I'm insulted that you actually would suggest that I would cheat this exam. This is how little you think of me as a client of yours. She said, Justin, please, you're very smart, but you can make some dumb decisions. Do not cheat the exam. So, of course, once I left his office.
You then went to the internet, started downloading.
I still have the receipt, Dr. Phil. $350. I bought a lie detector test, and I studied very aggressively for several days, studying to beat that exam and mastering all of the techniques.
All the countermeasures, everything from attacking the shoe to tightening your muscles and
the tush,
everything. And you got in there and failed miserably.
The lie detector test is presided by a former FBI agent. I did it at the office in San Francisco. And I sat for the test, and I squeezed my innards when appropriate, pinched the toe when I was supposed to, and I thought, I have this. Like, I'll be back on the golf course in 2 days. This is great. Then the results came back, and my lawyer asked the FBI agent to leave, and then they said with greater than 99.99% I had failed the exam. Okay. And I remember looking out into Alcatraz from the San Francisco office thinking, this is not good.
What if they just turn a cold shoulder to me again? Well, okay, what if they do? Then you'll try something else. Or maybe you'll eventually have enough and say, that's it, I'm out of here. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life beating my head against the wall. But you will survive. Accept the risk of vulnerability and accept the fact that you will survive. The third thing you've got to do is accept your partner. And that means you've got to stop focusing on the negatives. You got to take the chip off your shoulder. You have to realize that you don't have to react to everything you can react to. Just because they do something that you can justify being upset about, you can justify being hurt about, you can justify being wounded by, doesn't mean you have to be. You can make a joke out of it. You can choose to tease them about it. Pain is the price that you pay for resisting the natural order of things. There is a natural order of things. There's just a certain way people are going to be. Like I've said, Robin's very emotional. I love that about her. She's so much fun in that regard, and she gets so excited about things. It just fills up the room, and it's great when our kids were growing up, and it's great now with our grown kids and our grandkids. She gets so excited about things, and it just brings a texture to life that's really, really nice. I'm much more cerebral. I just kind of think about things, and I might have a great sense of satisfaction inside, but I don't do the happy dance like Snoopy in the Peanuts cartoons. She'll sometimes turn around and say, give me something. Come on. I mean, it's like you won the lottery or something. Give me something. Jump up and down. Throw caution to the wind and break into a smile. She teases me about it, but she doesn't resist the natural order of things because she knows that that's just the way I am. I'm kind of reserved in that way. I was raised by an alcoholic father in a very combative situation, and I kind of have emotions that are a little more constricted. That's just the natural order of things. So she knows that, and she'll redo something in the house and say, okay, come in and look at this. All right, close your eyes. Now open your eyes. What do you think? And I'll look at it and say, oh, yeah, I think I might like this. It's like, oh, God, do you like it or do you not? Well, after about 10 years, she's learned it'll take about a week for him to kind of think about it and look at it and live with it a while. And he'll sit in the room a while and look around and stuff. And then, in about a week, he'll tell me, I really like this. This really feels good. I really like this. And when he says it, he'll really mean it. But he's not going to just jump up and down and go, oh, wow, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my whole life. That's just not the natural order of things for me. And she's been great about accepting that. So ask yourself, do you accept your partner and their natural way of being in the world? And you don't have to love everything about somebody to love them. You can love what they do in certain situations and not love what they do in others, but you can still love them. I love that she gets so excited about things. And if by my yardstick it would be too excited, that's just by my yardstick. It's not by hers. So I accept her and her emotionality, and she accepts me and my analytical approach. And between us, it's a pretty good balance. So ask yourself, what can I do to accept my partner and the natural order of things the way they naturally are, instead of criticizing the fact that they aren't the way you are? Because like I said, Robin's very different from me. I don't want her to be just like me. I did not want our kids to grow up with two me's. I wanted them to grow up with a Robin and a Phil. And I certainly didn't want to be married to me. I don't want to be married to somebody that looks at things the way I look at them, thinks about things the way I look at them, reacts to things the way I react to them. How boring would that be if you were married to somebody that thought, felt, acted, reacted exactly the way you do? God, how boring would that be? That'd be terrible. You don't want that. You want them to be different. So accept your partner. Find things about them that you can focus on that are positive.